Good afternoon. My name is Tom Pelliccio. I'm the Global Vice President at Pilot Freight Services. Today, I'll be speaking to the group regarding global supply chains and overcoming COVID-19. The agenda that we will be covering today, we'll be taking a quick look back before COVID-19, the current environment, and obstacles and hurdles keeping your supply chains moving forward. Past, present, and future outlook. If we go back in time, second half of 2019 through the beginning of Q1 2020, we've seen a stable, predictable, growing economy with long-term strategies for both shippers and carriers. Carriers before COVID-19 had equipment available to shippers, stable pricing, a long-term approach, and ability to plan. We've seen many areas of positive growth and consistent, controlled growth before COVID-19. In our current environment, when COVID-19 settled in, we found ourselves with many obstacles. Obstacles from manufacturing, obstacles from carriers, obstacles from destination warehouses. So in today's current environment, we had many obstacles to overcome. We've seen manufacturing shut down. We've seen manufacturing ramp up, and we've seen consumers in the US continuing to buy, driving the B2C and B2B business. As we talk more about it, the air cargo rates had a continual climb and have still not even gotten close to the pre-COVID rate levels. We see stress on our domestic systems in the US, whether it's parcel carriers, heavyweight home delivery carriers, or B2B carriers. Ports and rails have total disruption. On the West Coast, we see multiple congestions at the ports in Long Beach. We see multiple days of containers waiting to get on the rail today. Warehousing and DCs overflowing. US truckload issues, where there's a shortage, high prices, and lack of equipment off the West Coast coming east to the eastern part of the United States. As we look at the current environment, 4 areas that stick out that all play in together is our domestic warehousing, truckload, and our air and ocean imports and the delays that consist with those. If we start with the air and ocean, we're seeing more storage, containers at ports with congestion, demurrage and detention. It's at the highest levels we've seen in many years. Capacity on the truckload side from West Coast is a market imbalance today that we are continuing to work through and trying to keep equipment rolling to customers' distribution centers as well as their final clients. On B2B and B2C shipments, we have seen historic levels of volume that have come through on the first quarter that will continue through Q2 and Q3 and potentially into Q4 of 2021. Equipment shortages, stress on domestic networks, volume spikes, and labor shortages are all playing into higher pricing and lower service levels for the foreseeable future. Current environments on the warehousing side, we find our clients today asking for flex space, asking for extra value services, transloading, kitting, truckload, labeling, ticketing, all types of warehousing operations that traditionally we would not see in the past, but they are overloaded at their distribution levels today. What is the cure? What is the vaccine for your supply chain? Certain areas we need to improve on are looking at our supply chain really from the start, from the manufacturing line, all the way through to the consumer shelf. Most people today look at their supply chain in certain areas, whether it's their air pricing, whether it is their ocean pricing, whether it is their dray, whether it is their origin services consolidation. In reality, you need to take a look at your supply chain from cradle to grave, from when that box leaves the manufacturer to the retail shelf. And how do you do that? Service bundling. Service bundling is an example of where the key role of today's logistics provider is to provide end-to-end logistics management, managing the suppliers offshore, securing space, gaining access to equipment, working with the dray providers, making sure that the customs brokerage is done correctly, transloading and truckload services, as well as domestic distribution. The most important piece of all bundled service is visibility in the supply chain and pricing and communication. As you can blend the three, you need to take bundling very seriously in 2021. In my opinion, when I see customers that are having certain providers touch the product 3, 4, or 5 times, is helping overall control of the goods and movement, reducing costing, as well as shortening the supply chain to the customer shelf. Overcoming COVID-19 in your supply chain. Items to take into consideration. Equipment is king. In today's environment, there's been equipment shortages around the world, from Southeast Asia to mainland China, which have been persistent for the last several months and will continue to be a shortage until the balance is corrected. You need a provider with a solution. Everyone can come up with the best price or a better price. But if you have pricing and you do not have service or equipment or guaranteed lifts, pricing doesn't mean much. Establish goals. Balance price and service. Work with carriers that have the ability on the FAK market, the premium market, the co-loader market. Have opportunities to continue to move your goods in the most expedited way at the closest market cost available. You need to trust your providers to make decisions. In a lot of cases, we find where we have customers that give us full authority to look at their supply chains and make decisions in the middle of the night, changing carriers, changing modes of transportation, looking at things differently and saying, this was better handled by making this type of move. So you need to trust your carriers to make the correct decisions on your behalf. The ability to bend around your needs. Carriers today need to sit and listen to your customer and understand what their needs are. Certain needs can be speed, certain needs can be cost, certain needs can be to be slowing down goods in the supply chain. So you really need to have a carrier that's going to sit, listen, and bend around your needs. In a lot of cases, I always say speed wins. And what I mean by speed wins is that you need to act quickly and make decisions quickly. In the scenarios that we are in today, with equipment shortages and opportunities, when you have a provider that can come up with a solution, and the solution makes sense and meets your transit time requirements, balances getting your product to market, you need to make decisions quickly. Those type of decisions, A, save money, B, gives you the ability to take certain consideration or certain part of your supply chain and lock it down, as well as the ability to move forward and focus on other parts of the supply chain. In a lot of cases we see today, clients that overthink or overlook solutions sometimes wind up having longer transit times at a higher cost. Some of my final thoughts I like to leave you with is service versus price. Have a plan. I mentioned it a few times, and in reality, service and have a plan is really talking short-term plan and then long-term plan. In today's market, short-term plans, I think, are more valuable than long-term plans. You need to have the ability to spin on a dime, continually change with the marketplace, and not tie into a particular carrier or a particular rate, because no one knows where the second half of 2021 is going to head. Communicate, communicate, communicate. What I find in a lot of cases is the forwarding community will continue to find creative ways to move your cargo. We will find creative ways to gain access to equipment. We will find creative ways to keep the cost down as much as possible. We will find ways to deliver product to your customers to meet your required delivery dates. And the only way to make this happen is to communicate, communicate, communicate. We find that the more communication, whether it is weekly calls, whether it is a scheduled email communication on reporting, but there has to be regular communication in order to be successful. Judge your service providers on solution design. Always have to be market competitive when it comes to pricing. Reporting, ability to manage equipment guarantees and procure the pricing is extremely, extremely important. The bottom line is we need to keep goods flowing. As we keep the goods flowing, overcoming COVID-19 in your supply chain should have many facets. BCO contracts, NVOCC contracts, ability to blend the two together. On the air cargo side, whether it is air charters or commercial lift, scheduled air freight, or emergency air freight, you need to have a plan. Rates and capacity will be constrained until passenger flights continue to get in the air. In today's environment, we need to work together, communicate, work with our service providers, understand your volumes, and understand where we're going as a group. As we move into 2021 Q2, we are seeing the market remaining extremely strong. As the market remains extremely strong, pricing will remain high on the FAK market. Pricing on the air cargo side will not drop to below or near pre-COVID levels. We need to look at how we mix cargo to get the best density. We need to understand what are the true transit time requirements. Are direct flights needed? Can we transit? Can we do sea air programs? Again, all of the solutions will rotate around data, communication, and sitting and working hand in hand. I understand that COVID has wreaked havoc on tons of supply chains. We see it in all industries. The key here is every industry has come back strong. Every industry had manufacturing idle for months, and the volumes in 2021 will continue to stay strong until we see a normalization in the marketplace. My goal today is to really talk to you about a bundling of services, understanding your product, and really taking a look at your supply chain truly from start to finish, cradle to grave, A to Z, call it what you want. In a lot of cases, I see too many logisticians, VPs of supply chains get caught up in one area of a supply chain. It's really your overall landed cost to your customer. When you build in the time on the rail, when you build in the time of transloading a container if necessary, if you look at ocean product and how many days it's on the water, depending on the value of your goods, origin services, whether it's origin consolidation or domestic distribution. When you have the ability to look at all points of the supply chain with multiple services under one carrier, it is extremely beneficial. Bundling of services, less touch points, security, damage, returns, all fall into play. The key here is communication. The key here is working closely with your carriers today that can guarantee equipment. In my eyes, equipment wins, speed wins, pricing, market pricing wins. There's so many different aspects of the supply chain that you need to bolt together. But in the long run, equipment, as we all look back on 2020, some of the largest customers or BCOs had issues and worked with NVOCCs directly in order to make sure they move their supply chains forward based on gaining access to equipment in the marketplace. It was an interesting year. I think 2020 was a great year. I think it was a great year in a lot of ways. It made a lot of companies step up. It made a lot of companies look at their supply chains differently. It allowed us to be as creative as we could be. It allowed us to communicate with our offices offshore on a nightly basis. It allowed us to bring on new verticals such as PPE, which dominated the market for months. But in the end, PPE settled down and retail, industrial, and all of the cargo took the front row and came back extremely strong. We were ready for it as a company. We were ready for it as an industry. We overwhelmed the carrier base with cargo, ground handlers. We have seen issues at destinations such as Chicago with COVID, where the ground handlers or destination services transferring of freight took multiple days. COVID affected suppliers. COVID affected airlines. COVID affected the ocean carriers. Where the biggest areas that we've seen were ports. When I refer to ports, airports and seaports, which slowed down the processing and the movement of freight. We all worked through it. We all made sure that we had our people waiting at the airports, trucks parked waiting for cargo to come in, whether they had to sit there all day or multiple days. We had management at gateways, pulling freight through, checking for freight, understanding and letting the airlines know that we were shutting production lines down, whether it was medical, automotive, retail. We made sure that every individual knew how important certain freight was and all freight. We never left a container behind where we never tracked or made sure that we had the visibility for that container on multiple days. Some of these containers, some of this air freight absolutely sat beyond normal times, but we got creative when it came to when we finally got our hands on it to make sure we transloaded that cargo and delivered it directly to our clients. So how do we overcome it? Where do we go next? I think that as a group, we all work together. I think what we see today is the ability of companies and opportunities of looking at their supply chains differently. And if I look back, some of the greatest accomplishments in 2020 were from people that picked up the phone and said, hey, this is what I have. This is my issues. Being open book allowed us to really look deep into supply chains and say, we can do this. Overall, we try never to overcommit, but we try to be as creative as possible and see what sticks. Creativity helped in many ways, as we will see in Southeast Asia, the continued growth in Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia will continue to grow in 2021, and your supply chains need to be ready for it. As we continue to grow as a company and we continue to grow as an industry, we continue to grow with your customers, you need to be prepared to understand that there's multiple solutions in these areas in order to keep your cargo moving. Other parts of the world, whether it be Europe, whether it be South America, the Middle East, all had their different challenges. Some of the largest challenges we've seen overall absolutely came out of the Far East. I just wanted to have a closing statement here of saying, I'm open for discussion to talk about your supply chains. I'm open to have my team take a deep dive and understand your challenges. Let us look at your challenges today and understand how we as a team or as a group can communicate to come up with ideas in order to keep your freight flowing. The key today, in my eyes, and the closing comment here is to say, work directly with your forwarders, the carriers out there today on good forecasting. Without good forecasting, carriers are not going to allow for over forecasting or under forecasting. When booking or signing contracts or working with NVOs there, which will be working on your behalf, they need extremely good forecasting for 2021. We're in the contract season now. Please consider that as a key point of success moving into 2021. Again, thank you for having me speak today. I look forward to talking to everyone in the breakouts. Have a great day.